This is an example of a small design that I created just as an example of something that's easy to design, easy to cut, and then with a nice finish you can get a nice piece in literally just a few minutes. So I'm going to show an example of how I designed it, and this is an example after it's cut out and finished. So I hope it's interesting. I'm going to start the design with an ellipse and then go from there. An ellipse is a nice shape, and I can do it as precisely as I want. In this case, I'm just going to get it approximately the size that I want. Okay, so now I've got an ellipse that will serve as my starting point, and then I'm going to have the word EnRoute on here, so let's get that in place. And these days I kind of like a informal font. This Gentile font is one that I purchased that I like, and so I'm just going to use it. And type it out, and then I can just size it the way I want. I'm holding the shift key down just to keep the aspect ratio, the X and Y relative dimensions the same, so I don't distort it. If I don't hold the shift key down, I can distort it, but in this case that's not what I'm looking for. I can also edit the spacing of the letters, the kerning, by using this tool, and I can come in here and play around with that a little bit. In this case I want to move the R in just a little bit so that it overlaps the tail on the N, and so that's what I'm going to do there. Okay, so once I have that, then sometimes what I'll do is I'll keep a copy of the design before I convert it to curves, just so I know that I can get back to it easily enough. And then I can convert this to curves and weld it together, and so it's real easy to then weld it, and then that makes it nice for making part of the relief surface. So once I have that, I'm just going to create a rounded relief surface here, and I can choose kind of the angle of the surface that I want to create, the resolution. In this case 100 dpi should be fine, and then click apply. Okay, so now I've got my base relief created. I want to add a texture to that, and there's lots of different texture options. In this case I'm going to use the multi-cell texture. I played around also with the multi-fract texture, which has a little bit more of a rougher surface that you'll get. The multi-cell gives me a nice texture that allows me to create something that looks sort of like it's been hand carved, and so I really enjoy that effect. And the way that I got to this surface, this gives me a preview down here. The way that I got to that is basically just playing around with the parameters. So I scaled the X to kind of stretch it out. You see that if I come back, it is a little more sort of proportional, and then I can scale it out to give it a little bit more of a stretched out in the X direction. I can play around with the other parameters to decide how rough I want the surface to be, or how kind of uniform I want it to be. And so by playing around, I got something that I like here. I'm going to specify the height of 0.35 and then click apply. Of course, you can always save a template. Once I get this the way I like it, I can save it, and then it makes it real easy to come back to it later once I decide that I like it. So here I get something that has kind of a nice kind of a chip carved sort of look to it. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the letters to that. Now in this case I want the letters to have a texture on them also, so I'm just adding them to the relief surface. It's relatively simple to make the letters be smooth or have their own separate surface, but in this case I wanted to have everything have the same texture, so that's what I'm going to do. So here I'm going to choose an angle, and I want to give it a little bit of height so that when it cuts out, it helps define the edges of the letters better. And so I'm going to do that. I'm going to click add and apply. And if I render it, you can see what that looks like. I also kind of like to have a little bit of a rounded surface there, so I'm going to add a little bit of a rounded surface on top of that, and that's one of the neat things about what you can do in EnRoute just with this relief tool, is you can add surfaces together to get the ultimate effect that you're looking for. And so in this case I've got beveled, and I'm going to add some rounded to it, and so this gives me kind of the look I'm looking for. So now if I flip here, you can see that I've got a surface that is, I think, an interesting surface that took me just a couple of minutes to create. So now if I want to toolpath it, then I'm going to move it down into the material, and I've defined my material at 1.5 inches high. And you see, when I created the relief, I didn't pay too close of attention to how tall it was. It's something that I could have paid closer attention to. In this case I didn't. And so what I can do is I can come up here and I can just ask EnRoute to fit that relief down into it. So what it does is it scales it vertically to fit it down into my available material, and then that makes it simple to cut out. Now I can come in here and scale it vertically myself. So if I wanted to scale it down just a little bit, I can do that, and then I can move it back up to the top of the material, so that gives me a little bit more on the edge there. If I want to have a little bit of edge on the piece that I'm cutting out, it's simple to do. And so now it's just a matter of toolpathing it, and in this case I've designed it specifically so that it'll be easy to cut out. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do an island fill. I'm going to choose a ball nose tool, and I can, because of the shape, I think I can use a 3/8 inch ball end tool, and I'm going to give it a depth of 1.4, which should be enough to get down to the bottom of the relief. I want to apply it to the relief surface. I do want an overcut, just a small overcut, to get me out to the edge of the material, and I won't go into too much detail with that. And then of course I can define feed rates that I want to use. For my machine, these feed rates work well. Spindle speed of 18,000 is kind of the sweet spot on my spindle. And then the key dimension that I want to define is the overlap. Because I'm using a pretty large tool, I can go with a 90% overlap, and that should work fine. Okay, now you see that I made one mistake here, and it's easy enough to come back and fix. I had the text selected, and so it put the toolpaths just inside the text object. That's not what I wanted to do, so I'm going to delete those toolpaths, come back. I'm going to select just the relief, apply those toolpaths again. Okay, and so now this is ready to cut out, and it's the nice thing about it that it will cut quickly, and you'll see that it did 2 passes. I probably don't need 2 passes, so if I was going to actually cut this piece out, I would go back and I would redefine my tool to tell me that I didn't need 2 passes, because the material that I'm cutting precision board, high density urethane foam. I can do that in 1 pass without any problem with a long cutting length tool, and so I don't need 2 passes. So I would go back and redefine that with 1 pass just for speed. But when I cut this piece out, that's how I did it, and it cut out fine. So anyway, that's a quick design, creating a 3D surface, applying a texture to it, designing some text, adding that to the surface, and the results that you get with that in literally just a few minutes, less than 10 minutes, is quite nice. So I hope this helps. Thanks.